Well, Vigilante is a play of about 70 minutes based on a true story. It's about a woman who seeks revenge for the murder of her family, her husband and her daughter. And it's a story I came across where someone took revenge by entering the prison service, dropped out of normal life, changed their identity, created an entirely different inner life, applied to join the prison service, and weaved their way through the system, moving from prison to prison to prison until they reached the prison where their enemy was in jail. And as a prison warder, therefore, gained access to the person they wanted to kill. And that's where the play starts. So we don't have the journey to the cell, we start at the cell. And the play is also between two women rather than men. The original true story concerned men, but I thought that it'd be much more interesting to have two women in confrontation rather than two men. It would make it a bit different. So many prison stories are about men, and it would shine a whole new light, hopefully, on women in prison. And so our play is quite different from the actual original story. The true story is really an inspiration for a fictional story. So it follows the same history of what actually happened, but is different in detail. It's not the same murder, it's not the same, they are not the same characters, obviously they're women rather than men. So it's used as a sort of jumping off point for a different narrative, but was inspired by the actual true story. If it's a dramatised documentary, for instance, you have to really stick to the facts. You can't have too much poetic license. There's a bit of leeway. I wrote several documentaries for Granada Television, and there you had to have 3 independent witnesses for every line of dialogue that you wrote, which means that the writer is simply a conduit for factuality, and it's not that interesting. Whereas if it's a totally fictional thing, I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, you're not restricted in any way. I mean, you can do whatever you like within the story, and it has its own grammar and its own world. So I think there's no limit to invention. A true incident is simply the catalyst for a piece of creative writing. I think we've always been interested in monologues. We've had several full-length monologue plays, Ride being perhaps the most successful. And we also have had a number of two-hander dramas. We had one about Robert Louis Stevenson and his wife living in Bournemouth. And this is very different from last year's production, Fukushima, of course. But I think, in a way, that was more different from what we're doing this year, which is a two-hander. I personally love two-handers and getting close to characters. I do like casts that are as small as possible so that we can really get to know the characters and their worlds. I think that where you have a big cast, it's quite difficult to latch on to anyone and to empathise. So I think it's also kind of a play that's quite conscious of prison conditions and has the kind of dramatic investigation of characters that we like to do on Doppelganger. I was very interested in the assumed murderer, and I wanted to make her quite an ambiguous character so that we weren't entirely sure at the end of the play whether she in fact was guilty of the crime, and to use her to investigate how someone in that situation might behave. For instance, she conducts her defence from her prison cell, and that idea came about through someone I knew who did that, who was actually illiterate when they went to prison and learned to read and write and then conduct their defence from their cell, and won in the end, which is an incredible achievement. And so that was in my mind with creating this character. But I would say that the characters change and evolve as you write. You can't prescribe a characterization. Characters take on their own life and sometimes do things you don't want them to do. I think it's important that I don't like these kind of ideas that that are set in stone. I think you need to go down avenues and different byways and discover characters rather than just set them in stone, as it were. Well, I'm involved. Basically, I trust Charmaine, who I've worked with a lot over many years, and I think it's much better to let the actors Charmaine get on with it, really, rather than have me hanging around like Hamlet's ghost. We talk and we discuss, and there are telephone conversations, and I come in from time to time, and that's how it works very well. In other productions, one might be more intensely involved, but here, where Charmaine has worked on I suppose about 10 scripts, I can trust her to, and she's a brilliant director, so I tend to stay away until we get a producer's run, until we get a dress run, and then I come in and I may make a few comments. But Charmaine and I will have discussed the script before work starts anyway. So I'm involved to a great extent, but not in the room all the time.